Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Noe with Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners. We are back at it for a brand new episode, episode 53. And we are winding down the year. It's almost the holiday season. Cannot wait. And you're in for a treat today for those catching this episode. I have an awesome guest with me to talk a little bit more about culture beyond what we talked about last week when I was at a live event in Cincinnati talking culture. So this is something that continues to bubble up. And so today I have Jessica Noon, founder of Daybreak Ideas. Jessica, welcome. How are you today?
Thanks so much. I'm doing great. It's such a nice day outside.
Yeah, so we are winding the year down, getting ready for the holidays, and companies are kind of preparing for next year and really seeing what they want to do for 2026. Technology is changing, and the workforce is changing, and just the more and more information that comes out about the workforce and culture and human connection, it's such an ever evolving topic, I feel like, and really it's not one size fits all. It's
Right.
what happens when it's not working right. That's the big question mark for companies. And, really that's something we're going to dive into today. So we're going to play the envelope icebreaker game to hear more about Jessica's background. If you are tuning in to the blog of the week with Speakeasy HR, brand new blog of the week amongst other blogs that I've posted over the last few weeks, been busy on the blog scene, but the week 46 is on strength. So check that out at speakeasyhr.com. So Jessica, we had connected a while back, and when I, just like everyone else, I kind of figure out like what we want to talk about and really things that are relevant to you and your work right now. So tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you've been working on in the past, and kind of what you're focused on now.
That's a great question. And in many ways, I've always been in culture, right? But it didn't always have the title on it of culture.
Yep.
So I have a cool portfolio career where I've been the builder and originator of a specialty function inside mostly founder led businesses,
Mhm.
Fortune 500, 5 years across the UN system in an advisory capacity. And I can say, whether I was building out a specialty function for talent acquisition and talent management or two learning and development functions or an advisory function, I mean, it all comes back to those essential elements of culture. Now, I also, in Daybreak Ideas, half of my half of my business is still that advisory practice for culture transformation for established organizations. But then I also help mentor founders who are just starting to upgrade their teams beyond like a handful of contractors and an intern and like somebody that right? Because you already trust them. And so my goal is to take all of the learnings from all of those established organizations and just say, hey, let's be proactive. Let's build it right the first time. And then that way you don't need me. I'm trying to write myself out of a job here. You won't need me in 5 years. Let's do it for cheap now.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were uh, younger, growing up, going through school and whatnot, what were you wanting to be when you grew up?
Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea. I picked English. Well, I actually started school as a music education major.
Okay.
I had a dream to be a choir director because that was the first person who really motivated me and helped me to see myself as potentially a leader. It was like the first
Got
time
it.
I ever was given a leadership title was section leader in the sopranos section in high school.
Okay.
And so I wanted to do that. And I quickly learned that you couldn't really just be a choir director anymore. You had to do band and you had to work across different schools. And honestly, middle schoolers are terrifying. And I quickly decided to do something else. Always
Yeah.
loved reading. So I said, let's do English. And I thought I was going to be a copy editor. And
Okay.
my internship actually became my eventual first job that I talked my way into. Um,
Okay.
but they said, well, we'll teach you everything about HR and you'll edit our policy book for your internship. And I was like, perfect. And I fell in love with it.
That's awesome. So I asked this question for the guests coming on, and I've recently started asking it, and I really am fascinated to hear what people have to say. And it goes back to the advice you've given the advice you've been given in your career. So
Mhm.
what's been the biggest piece of advice you've ever received?
Hmm. It's a really good question. I mean, I think, like, the opposite answer to that question is probably like, what's the advice I never listened to? And it was, I've been told a lot, just get your head down and work and just meet your targets and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But it's so hard for me to only focus on what's, like, prescriptive, and when there's this glaring other thing over here that I know could make more of an impact, and I just can't not work
Yeah.
outside of my very, like, specific job description, and so I'm always doing other things. Um, but I guess to that end, one of the most influential leaders that I've ever worked for, and really we only worked together a short time, but like still some things that she used to say stuck in my head. One was that we're not actually saving lives. So like I should leave before 11 p.m. Fair. Very fair. And every time I find myself in a place where I'm burning myself out because I have my focus on this,
Yeah.
goal, which is great. I want to do my best and I want to, really go above and beyond, but at the same time, not at my own expense. And so that's something I really had to learn.
Yeah.
So that was good. It can be important to work towards something that you feel that you believe in and feel really matters. And also, if I'm literally not doing like heart surgery, I don't really need to be there at 11 p.m. So I also need to self care and sleep.
Yep.
And then the other one was, regarding leadership. I think, as a young kid, I definitely would feel sometimes intimidated with people who were, a few levels above me. And, I learned we're all humans, right? And so that's allowed me to really lean into the knowledge and the expertise that I do have. And even if someone has more experience in a different area, it doesn't mean that they're not still humans. And that allows me to help people work together at all different levels.
Yeah.
So that's been really influential and helpful as well.
Yeah. We are now living in a world where there's 5 generations working together,
Yeah.
and it's just very fascinating when you look at what we've had to deal with over the last 5 years, and now AI and technology. And again, culture is an ever living, breathing piece of an organization, and managers play a big role in that. Leadership plays a big role in that. Your new hires play a big role in that. So we'll dive into that a little bit more as we get into the episode. So Speakeasy HR is part of the Work Defined network. So if you have not checked that out, go to workdefined.com. All kinds of great podcasts out there, including Speakeasy HR, to fill your cup with podcasts and other great content out there if you have not checked them out. So, okay, Jessica, are you ready to play the envelope icebreaker game?
Let's do it.
This is something that I started when I first got into this Speakeasy HR podcast idea. And I thought, what would be fun to learn about the guests beyond just like, tell me a little bit about yourself, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's 15 envelopes. So you get to pick a number 1 through 15. So I'll give you a few seconds to think of a number as I transition slides here. So think of a number and I'll see you in just a few seconds. All right. So 1 through 15, what do you got?
I got 4.
4. All right. I like it. Number 4 it is. And it says, what's something recent that made you laugh out loud?
Oh, that's hard because I'm constantly laughing out loud. Oh my gosh, how do I pick? Um, I started watching this show Shrinking on
Okay.
Apple TV, and
Okay.
I don't even remember what it was, but that show is so great, and every so often there's just a subtle little joke slipped in that just makes me laugh out loud. So that's the honest answer. But
Shrinking.
anything
Okay.
like very silly or absurdist is definitely my sense of humor.
Okay. Very good. I was on, I think it was Facebook last week, and there was a video of a robot out on stage coming out. I don't know if you saw it, but it
No.
like fell, and they tried to put this like curtain over it because it wasn't like operating correctly. It was supposed to be like doing all these things. It was somewhere in another country. And I started reading the comments, and even just they had so many problems with just putting the like curtain over it, and it was all twisted. And then I started reading the comments, and I was laughing so hard, and like it just I don't know. I haven't sat there and like watched something on social media before that recent and just laughed so hard. I was just like, "Yep, that's what's happening right now in technology." Like these robots are just like falling over, and they couldn't figure out what the heck was going on, so they just tried to put this curtain up, and then it was all twisted. And anyway, it was hilarious. So you can probably find it if you haven't seen it. I think it was in Russia or somewhere. Anyway,
Sometimes the
um,
comment section can be really depressing, and
oh
but
my
then
god.
some comment sections, it's like these people should all be in comedy
Oh my
writing.
gosh. I even read the comments, the comments, I read them out loud to myself, and then I start laughing. It's pretty funny. Anyway, all right, you wanna do one more? One
Let's
more
do it.
number.
Okay, 8.
8. Ooh, these are good numbers. I haven't had people pick out 8 and 4 recently. Normally, it's just 7, 13. Okay. What's your "I wasn't expecting to love this" moment in your career?
Ooh. I mean, kind of the whole thing. HR never really occurred to me
Yeah,
beforehand, before I started doing it. Really
yeah,
didn't know what I wanted to do until I was doing it.
yeah,
And I also didn't realize in the beginning of my career how connected it actually was to my major. Because if you think about it, what is being an English major? It's, you have a piece of paper, you're reading between the lines, you're intuiting things about the character, you're
yep,
analyzing the
yep,
whole situation and how it affects the people. And if you think about it, that's the exact same thing as HR, except bonus, when you're in TA, you actually get to meet the character.
yeah,
So
right?
so I definitely, it connected with me in a way that I was not expecting.
Yeah,
And I think it allowed me to become a person that I didn't know I could be, right?
yep,
I considered myself very shy as a young kid. And then I realized, well, maybe that was situational. Maybe I was a little nervous around new people, but actually, once I leaned into and learned that I had an expertise in this area and I had good instincts in this area, it allowed me to experiment and actually kind of like fail, low stakes fail.
yeah,
And that was hugely transformative to me,
yeah,
which is another thing I never expected as like an overachiever. Straight A 4.0, person. The idea of experimenting and failing was not, it was never like I never had a space for that to be okay,
yep,
right? So that was also another thing, that this like realization. That's why I went back to grad school after 6 years of being in the workforce and
yeah,
got my MBA, because I thought, I picked a major that I could do.
yeah,
What would happen if I picked a major that I wanted to learn? I mean, hello, that's obvious to most people, but for me, I was a scholarship kid. I was just like, whatever gets me an A, gets me through this, gets me the
right.
paper, right? But then when I went and got my MBA, it was because I really wanted to build a skill and be better at something than what I already was, which is a normal reason to go to school. So initially went for fun, and
Yep.
then again, it was another thing that I fell in love
Yep. A lot of people don't grow up wanting to be in HR. You just kind of fall
with.
into it. I'm one of those people, and I've been almost doing it now 20 years, and it's again, it's one of those pieces of an organization that is very important. It ties together every department. It's just that web of a department, and plays a lot into the role of culture and building culture. So we're going to dive into that. I'm with Jessica Noon, founder of Daybreak Ideas. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you are watching live, thanks for making part of your Monday with us. Would love to hear from you. Any questions along the way, just throw them in the chat. But just a few comments, messages from our sponsor, Payroll Partners, and then we will be back to it in about a minute. And we're going to dive into this top shelf topic. 1 second.
Finding a new employee takes time and money. For one position on a single job board, you could easily spend a minimum of $5 to $10 a day advertising a job post. It's worth noting that the average time it takes to hire a new employee is 36 days. However, it can take longer than that. You could find yourself paying hundreds of dollars a month for a single job board. And if you're using multiple job boards for multiple positions, this could add up to thousands of dollars a month. There is a much simpler and more affordable way of finding the right candidate. At Payroll Partners, we offer an applicant tracking system to help manage your hiring process. Our ATS is customizable, allowing you to decide which days you want to run the job and when to close it so you don't break the bank. And this feature lets you e-blast your network, posting jobs on multiple boards at once, all managed in one location. Payroll Partners, elevating your payroll and HR experience.
So if you are shopping around payroll, HR technology, just not getting what you think you deserve for service, customization, and really just feeling like you're with a partner that cares about you and your business, look us up, payrollpartners.net. Check in with me on LinkedIn. Would love to hear what's going on in your world, in your organization, and see if we can help. So, Jessica, I love talking culture. I'm so glad you brought this topic because I feel like I learn every time I talk to somebody about culture and their insights and knowledge into their world and what they have learned about culture. So, we're talking about designing culture that works and really what to do when it doesn't. And I feel like, culture that works. What does that actually mean in practice, beyond the buzzwords to you?
I love that you started here because I think to anyone who isn't directly in this work, and I think most HR people are going to understand and align with what I'm saying, culture isn't like a happy hour, right? It's not a pool table. It's not real. That's part of it, right? The environmental conditions. But if you stop there, right, and you stop at events and you stop at like training or whatever, you're missing the deeper point. Culture is nothing more than the set of actions and decisions that are supported and rewarded in the organization. We're talking behavioral patterns at scale. Now, humans obviously come into the business and each person is going to be different and have different needs. And so we're not talking about, a culty thing where everyone has to speak the same way
Right.
and use the same word, but we are talking about questions like when someone gets promoted, is it because they forced money to happen at the expense of their team?
Yeah.
Is it because they took credit for other people's work? Do you even know how to know that, right? Like, do you have any visibility into the mechanism behind success in your organization? What makes it happen? What makes it fail? Are there people who are just louder than everyone else that we just instinctively, I mean, we're human, right? We
Right.
listen to the loudest voice in the room. And are we doing anything to reach everyone else, right? Are we getting the best data as leaders? Most people don't think about that, right? They think I know my business and I know what makes it work, but there's always two levels, right? If there's what you see and what's actually happening. So when we talk about actions and decisions that make the organization work, like that define success and sustainable success, not just next quarter success.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What aligns everyone in the company? We talk a lot about purpose, and many times obviously part of the point of being in business is to make money and survive, and of course, but that's not enough of a purpose. What are we really working towards? Whose lives are we trying to improve? Even internally, right? Let's say that you know you're in HR, right? One of your purposes is of course to protect the company, but it's also to protect the people. We always have a dual purpose there. So what actions and what decisions need to be true in order for that to happen? And so those micro discussions can ladder up to a larger purpose. What does the company even exist for? Why did we start this in the first place? And does everyone even know how their work ladders up to that purpose?
Right.
Um, Even when I'm describing it, it sounds fluffy to me, but there are ways to engineer it on a very tactical level that can be baked into every facet of performance.
Yep.
What are we rewarding people for? What are we letting go? Because that's, even more than just like putting in consequences or accountabilities. It's like, what are we ignoring
Yep.
in our business? So things like that. These are the things that I examine when I'm with a client.
Absolutely. So, what are some very first signs a workplace culture really is starting to slip, right? Even before leadership notices anything's wrong.
hmm Yeah, one of the biggest tells that is hard to see, because again, it's not the loud signs that you have to pay attention to, it's the
Yep.
quiet ones. It's people are going silent.
Hmm.
People are, not curious about the things that are going wrong. They have just kind of said, I'm checking out.
Yeah.
A lot of times this happens if people feel they're raising their voices and just not, the feedback is going nowhere, right? This is a really common thing. So one of the first things I would look at actually are, what's the exit data,
Hmm.
and what does your feedback look like, right? Have you, and it's not just about surveys, but even within the manager employee relationship, what are the patterns, what are the things that are coming up?
Hmm.
Not just what are all of the individual issues, but which ones are repeated, which ones are patterns. Where are people saying, hey, I think this could be better? When you don't do anything about, when people say, hey, I think this could be better, that's an expression of hope, not criticism. And I think a lot of leaders, that's hard, because when it's your business, especially a founder-led business, when it's your business, it feels personal to hear something like that. But in fact, it's a sign that people are saying, hey, I care enough to raise this,
Yep.
and let's investigate it more. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you have to go with every suggestion off the shelf. It just means, hey, these are signals that I need to investigate more. And let's put a working group together. Let's ask more people, right? Like involve more people in these kinds of questions. If you don't have anything in place for any of this, which don't worry, like if you don't, it's very
Yeah.
common not to. But if you go to a more proactive place, like if you're saying, I have this gut feel that something might be off, or something might be missing, or I might need to work on it, listen to that and then investigate more. Get that feedback. Make sure that you really understand the problem, because it's going to be different based on your environment and the type of business that you're in and the people who are there. But with that proactive mindset, it allows you to get past this idea that culture is something that you only work on when there's something wrong.
Right. So every organization wants a strong culture. It really doesn't. Not every culture fits every team, too. So how do you help companies define a culture that's right for them, not just a copy of someone else's culture?
Yeah. I think one thing we have to detach from is like location, right? Look, culture is not location specific. Culture is way more tied to business
Yep.
outcomes and how you achieve them, and how much you're equipping people with the tools that they need to do their job and things like that. So it's actually much more basic. And most people say, "Oh, that sounds too beginner. Like we're past that." But actually, every single time I get called in to help with a culture transformation, it always comes back to these elements of accountability, communication,
Yep.
managers being equipped and knowing how to deal with these complex environments, understanding the outcomes of the work and not just the day-to-day minutia. What are we all working towards together? If you can answer these questions, you have a really strong starting point to be able to build culture on purpose. Because even if you're the most successful, as you grow, culture is going to get away from you
Mhm.
if you haven't designed it up front.
Right.
And designing it up front means we engineer these things. We decide on purpose what is going to be rewarded, and how these systems of work actually work. What does innovation actually look like?
Right.
Because it's more than just being inside an office. You can do innovation if you have the tools. Um, and really deciding, what are we going to attach this to, because there is no one culture.
Right.
You're absolutely right, that works for everyone. So it's looking at, let's say, it's actually looking at the order of prioritization.
Yeah.
because I can say like location, and I can say innovation, and I can say collaboration, and like it's very natural for people to go into silos, for example.
Yep.
And the bigger you get, the more silos are forming, and especially when you're in that growth stage, maybe for the first time. Let's say you're a startup, you just got funded, and you have this core starting team who are kind of a little bit jack of all trades. Once they start hiring team members under them, their role has to change, and this is where silos start to form, because that usually doesn't happen just naturally. You have to put structure behind it.
Yep.
um so overall, I would say, what are the commonalities? I mean, people being involved in strategic decisions that impact them, or that they have an on the ground viewpoint to. Are you creating pathways to move in your organization that are not just, "Hey, when am I gonna get promoted?"
Yeah.
Do you have a really good, strong design for how each function connects to the others?
Hmm.
Because that's one of the backbones of collaboration, but also career development, which is
Yep.
one reason why people leave, is to grow and change careers. I've worked in with a lot of senior professionals with career pivots when they're ready to just move on and diversify their skill set,
Yep.
and there's no way inside their organization to do it. And that's one of those like invisible, you can say like everyone wants career development, and so we think it should be formal training. It's not always.
Right.
And so giving people ways to move, giving people reasons and systematic ways to connect around the work, make it make sense for them.
Yeah.
And then they'll operate within it.
Yeah. So we often hear about people leaving companies, uh, not because of the company, but they leave because of the manager. So, what role do frontline leaders and supervisors play in really shaping or damaging that culture day to day?
Probably the biggest one. Probably the biggest one. And it's um it's critical to equip them, and I don't necessarily mean through formal training, but again, being super clear on the expectations that they should be setting with their teams,
Yep.
and understanding, again, hate to be a broken record, but how the work of like the most junior intern ladders up to why the company exists. Like it is always an existential thing. If
Right.
someone's not doing their job, there's a reason that we fire someone for not doing their job. It's because it hurts the company, right? And you can get more detailed about that statement. Obviously, it's like every single person in your company has an impact ultimately. And if they don't, then that's a separate
Yeah.
conversation. If there's, no reason for a role to exist, then there's a much different design conversation that we have to have.
Yep.
But they need to be supported. And when I say that, yes, there is a role certainly for formalized training, for coaching, especially. There is a huge factor that the design of the culture and the design of the organization plays. But also, senior leadership has a role for the middle managers as well. One thing that breaks a culture really easily is when we are passing along stress from the top to the bottom. That's a really good way to erode trust.
Yeah.
Our emotions, let's say when we're managing people, feedback is an easy example. Everyone has feelings about feedback. I have feelings about feedback. And when someone comes to me with a characterization of something that they see, right? Meaning like, oh, you did this and it means you're lazy, or it means you don't care. It's might not mean that maybe I have something going on in my life. Maybe this other person didn't get me their deliverables on time. You just don't know until you ask a question. And too often the people at the top are under so much pressure, and they think, well, I don't have time to explain this. So I'm just going to pass it on. I'm just going to get it off my desk.
Yeah.
If we take 30 extra seconds to just say, hey, this is because, you don't have to go into the whole backstory, but it's important for middle managers to be equipped with the reasoning behind decisions at the top so that they can manage that with their teams.
Right.
Oftentimes you just don't get the same level of information, and it would be too much to just explain every detail, but you have to know if there's a directive from the top, you have to know what's behind that, like why is it important? And if you don't, then that's a separate conversation, right?
Yeah.
So they need to be supported with people just being more objective, less frantic, I think, from the top. Even in times that are urgent, even in pressure situations, you can communicate that this is a high pressure situation without emotionally giving that energy to that person. So regulation is really important. You also need to understand, as a middle manager, the upstream and downstream impacts of every choice and every decision that you're making. This is
Yep.
something that coaching is so good for,
Mm.
because I mean, there are some people who have like gone into it and gotten coaching certifications themselves, but there are some people who've just never been exposed to this and don't know what it's like. I always had micromanagers, not my entire career, but in the very beginning, and
Yep.
certainly through school, and most people come up that way, and so they've never seen what it looks like to do it differently, and so your reflex might be to micromanage. That's another
Mhm.
example. How else could you know what different looks like unless you have that experience? So giving people that mentorship experience, this is one way that training really helps.
Yeah.
It's a safe container in which you can experience what different looks like.
Right.
Yeah. So upstream and downstream impacts. Who under my charge is this affecting, and who and how ultimately does it roll back up? Feedback again, like getting feedback and having those clear open lines of communication with the very, very front lines,
Yeah.
and the very most junior levels of your organization. Oftentimes those are the people who are customer facing, who get the best data. So really making sure we understand the situation from their viewpoint. There's a lot of pressure on middle managers.
Oh, yeah.
And so yeah, and then when there's pressure from the bottom and pressure from the top, it,
Yep.
it does create this scenario where many of us are feeling very overwhelmed.
Yep.
We just have to have the support to be able to kind of shield our people from that pressure a little bit. It's okay to communicate urgency, of course, but as long as it's not, "Oh, you have to do this now," and um, and that can only happen with support.
Yeah. So misalignment between stated values and lived experience in common. How do you companies close that gap between what's written on the wall and what employees actually feel in the job?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, knowing how employees feel is part of that battle, right? I mean, you don't always know.
Yeah.
But I talk to employers about this a lot when it comes to employer brand.
Hmm.
Everyone's brand is a bit aspirational. That's just
Yep.
facts. But when we're recruiting someone great into our company, and then they get here and the experience is wildly different, that's a problem. And that's usually the person. And you'll see this if people are coming in and not even making it past the first month, and then they're leaving again or accepting another offer, and they get in after their first day and they're like, whoa. You can see at what point do people leave in the organization, and that'll give you important information,
Yep.
like how long has their tenure been, are there patterns. I was once in a large company, and we figured out that the most people who were just at the individual contributor level, not quite their first management role, but leading up to it, they were leaving it at 2 years. And so that's the problem that we investigated
Mm.
and came up with, a couple of different ways to tackle that. Um, but it was definitely a company that said, hey, we care about your development. And when it was harder to get resources for development or understand how to navigate the organization, or they weren't very clear on how they could, exactly how they could move between functions in the organization, which is another thing that they had said in their employer brand. When those things aren't obsessively abundantly
Yeah.
clear, people will just leave rather than, they'll ask their manager. If their manager doesn't know, they'll be like, guess there's nothing. And then they'll usually leave rather than work really hard to figure out what the resources are for them and the
Yeah.
options. They just say, guess there's nothing.
Yep. So in a world with hybrid work, rapid change, constant burnout, I've been in many situations where there's multiple locations, and it's really hard to have that like modern culture design and how it's consistent amongst every single location if you have people all
Mhm,
over. So
mhm.
what should modern culture design look like today compared to maybe 5 years ago?
Flexibility.
Yep.
You have to figure out a way that flexibility works in your organization. And that can mean a lot of things. And it depends on the type of business. Some businesses honestly don't have the privilege and luxury to be fully remote. That makes sense, right? And you want to be as fair as possible, of course. At the same time, flexibility could look like, well, maybe this person, because they came in as, let's say, on the manufacturing side of a product-based business, doesn't mean they can never get to, like, if accounting is your dream, like, let's figure out a way to get there. So flexibility in helping people navigate the organization is one. Location flexibility is obviously another.
Mhm.
Um, Going to concrete on the return to office, if you're not already there, I would definitely encourage a more nuanced take on that.
Yeah.
There are many reasons why companies push for return to office. Some of it is just simply investment in the community and in the office itself. And if it stands open, I mean, what are they doing? I think there are other ways around that, but I'm not a real estate expert and can't really speak on that. But flexibility with your people, allowing them to be humans. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. This whole 996, would you know what this? Where people, especially in the AI sector, are saying, well, in order to be competitive, we have to do, I think it's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's just not realistic. People's human brains don't work that way. And if indeed, like, you're using an AI powered workforce, then why is it not making you more efficient to where you could go down to 4 days and maybe that would be more competitive? I think it needs to be looked at with a very skeptical lens, whether things like that are very controlled and very uncompromising are really the best course of action. One thing that we learned, and there were obviously, COVID was not a great time for the world. And one thing that it proved is that it is possible to still have success and a healthy, healthy enough economy to have that flexibility. And it's natural and it's human to say, gosh, I wish things could go back to the way that they used to be. But progress is inevitable, change is
Yep.
inevitable, and rather than fighting it, it's just like, when you're in a much simpler example, if you're in an employee conversation and they're bringing something to you and they're really upset about it, the more you fight those emotions, the more intense they're going to become. And so you have to allow the emotion to happen. You don't have to take it on, but you have to allow the emotion to happen and say, I hear you. And it's the same with policy and flexibility.
Yep.
If people are screaming that they care about flexibility, then we have to find a way that makes sense to navigate what that looks like.
Yep.
And I think it's more complex than just return to office or not, or hybrid or remote.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that when I'm interviewing, I ask them because we're in the office, we like to collaborate, we're a small team, and I try to ask them about their work preference in office, whatever, what their culture, what they like about the culture they've been in before, what motivated them to go to work. So really we can figure out like, are they going to fit what we have as a culture? And
Right.
so I try to measure that over the first few months of new hires, and it's gone really well. So our turnover is not very very high. We retain a lot of our employees, and I'm
Mhm.
a firm believer that it really can be something measured as you recruit and
Mhm.
onboard people. So if you are listening to this and you're not really asking applicants about their culture, what they are looking for in a culture, if they're asking you in the interview like what's your culture like, you got to be ready to answer that.
Yeah.
And the managers need to be ready to answer that in an interview, because if you can't answer that with a solid response, they're going to think like, do they even know what their culture is like? And if I ask people, a lot of times they don't even know how to answer that question. What's your culture
Mhm.
like if I worked for your company? Well,
Yeah.
we offer free lunch here and there, and we have free coffee. Okay, that's great.
Cute.
you know,
I I love cheese and beer as much as the next
yeah,
person, but that's not what I'm asking,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What they're really asking is, can I be my version of human here? Can I move
Yep.
at all here? Is this a place where I can grow? Everybody wants to grow in some
Oh
way,
yeah.
and it doesn't always mean just linear
Yep.
promotions. And, does this suit my lifestyle? I'll be honest, I never wanted a full remote job. I sometimes go into co-working spaces in the city because I love having the buzz around. It helps me
Yeah.
focus. I like having other people working near me because my little self-competitive voice in my head goes, I can't be working less hard than this person.
Right.
The silliest thing, but it really, like,
Yeah.
helps me work so fast. But it's so individual,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think you bring up a great point. There is a culture that works for everyone, and some people want 996, and by all means, my friends, try it out, see how it goes. If that's something that makes you go, "Yeah, I want that." But, being really honest upfront and putting everything on the table with candidates is major, including some of the challenges that about, that some of the challenges that are like, you think it might be a deal breaker, they might be exciting to someone,
Oh yeah.
I've always been a person who goes after challenges because I'm insane and,
Yep.
and so some of the things you can bring up to me in an interview, I'll be like, "Oh, that's a problem I wanna solve," instead of, "Oh, no, like, this is not there are definitely problems I don't wanna
Yeah.
touch," right? If you have a culture of yellers, I'm sorry, I cannot help you. Um, deal with that first and then call me.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but yeah, being really honest is a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So if a company could uh, only fix one thing tomorrow to improve culture immediately, what should it be and why?
Mm. I think being willing to challenge yourself on what you think is the right thing to do, right? You have to remain open to other viewpoints changing your opinion
Yep.
and other information and other data.
Yep.
When I say data, it could be verbal data, it could be anecdotal, it could be, patterns that you yourself see as a senior leader. You probably are in a position where you're able to quickly spot
Mhm.
patterns. That's why I'm in consulting, because that's one of my skill sets, right? So you can hear 5 stories and be like, this one thing is the thing that people keep saying. Whatever data you're getting, make sure you're getting it from all levels, all
Yep.
functions. If you're not, that's the first thing to do to make sure you're breaking that barrier. And then secondly, when you see that pattern, show that you hear that pattern, and reflect it back to the people. Say, listen, we heard you, and here's what I am doing next. And you don't have to have the answer, but you should include them in designing the answer.
Yep.
One of the best things that I have learned to do through my work in consulting, and now I will also do this as a standalone offer. And I definitely encourage work after to make it sustainable. But if you just need to figure out what the problem is or what the solutions are, we will get the entire company in a room and we will work on it together, because your best solutions are not going to come from the boardroom. Your best solutions are going to come from the people dealing with whatever it is every day. And so co-creation is the major, major, major door to putting in a solution that is fast, that everyone is bought into, and that really actually solves the problem and doesn't just treat a symptom.
Right. Yeah. Communicating change, communicating doesn't matter the size of the company. I've worked
Mhm.
in small, large organizations, and it seems like if communication's better, people are aware of what's going on. They don't feel like they're left in the dark. They know why things are happening and understand it before they have some kind of perception and to a situation that they feel that they don't really fully agree with. And if they understand it better, then they might be on board, or they still might not be on board. But, what about just newer managers? Let's say someone was
Mhm,
promoted within the last year to a management role.
mhm.
Anything that they should try to do as a leader of a department, of other coworkers that maybe they worked alongside and were promoted, right? Promotion from within. And now you're managing your peers, right? So
Mm.
what advice would you give somebody in that kind of situation to focus on for the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, again, don't feel like you have to have all of the answers to that.
Right.
It's a tricky thing moving from peers to now you're a manager.
Yeah.
And there are plenty, don't discount the relationship, the relational aspect to that, right? One of the things that I always recommend and that these workshops can be really good for actually is when you are either a newly promoted leader or a leader who has inherited a team that you don't know that well,
Yeah.
have a reset. Have a reset moment with all of these cultural aspects. Again, how people move. Should we have a no meeting day? Like, what is the climate of the level of burnout, because everybody has it these
Oh,
days,
yeah.
right? What is the what's the climate and the energy level among the team members? Do they have shared preferences for, like, let's say no meetings before 10? Easy enough. Everybody puts a calendar block
Yep.
at 9 a.m. Little things like that really do add up and bring the team together and give them the experience of, here's how we make a decision as a team. It's not doesn't have to be a consensus
Right.
decision, but it just has to be something in the middle that everyone can live with.
Yep.
When you put yourself forward as that type of leader, immediately it is a reset of trust, because keep in mind too, who if you're inheriting someone from another manager, they may have had a very different
Yep.
experience. One of the most common reasons that leaders bring me in is when there is this like historical, almost like I don't want to use the word trauma and to make light of that word, but sometimes it is light trauma,
Yeah.
little t trauma when you have a manager who um, you know, was a command and control or a yeller, right? And then you come in with a manager who is very much about that collaboration and very much, trying to do a reset. Oftentimes times they bring in a coach like me, or a consultant like me to do one of these resets, to have a third party come in and say, okay, here is how it can be. Here's the experience of what different looks like. Otherwise, that trust issue will also be inherited.
Yep.
So, having that reset moment where you're designing these things with your team, it presents you with a new avenue for communication. It encourages people to speak up who might not have otherwise spoken up.
Yep.
It gives you a chance to air the problems, because just pretending like the problem isn't there is not gonna solve the problem. Again, it magnifies it, and so talking openly in a like an unemotional way before something becomes an emergency
Yep.
is a huge, huge thing as well. So,
Yep.
again, that reset moment could be a meeting, could be at one-to-ones, and then you bring it back and say, "Here were the patterns across all my one-to-ones. Here's what I'm noticing. What do you think about it?
Yep.
And how can we solve it? What are your ideas?" It really sets an important tone. And that's across industries, that this happens everywhere. And this is always a good first step.
Yep. Trust, respect, connection,
Mhm.
being there for your team and trying to develop them to grow in their role in the organization will really help
Yeah,
retain your people. So, um,
definitely.
well, I did want to pull this up. This is your QR code for your free strategy call. So
Yes.
tell everybody about what they could get with this.
Absolutely. So in our free strategy session, literally just bring me the challenge, you know, talk about it in an unstructured way, and let's brainstorm
Yeah.
together to see. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity to support you, but maybe not. Maybe you just need that one decision made. I'm happy to be that person to work through it with you and say, okay, here's what I'm hearing, here's how I might approach it. And then by all means, you can hang out and like try it on your own, come back to me when you're ready, or just DIY it. That's also okay. So anyone who is feeling like my team performance isn't quite where it needs to be, and I'm not 100% sure. I've tried a bunch of things, not really sure what this is.
Yeah.
How do I fix it? Or like we were talking about, a leader who has just taken on a new team, great moment to have one of these strategy calls. Or if you're saying like you're looking at your exit data or your feedback and you're seeing some symptoms and you want to make sense of like, is my gut right? Like, let's do a
Right.
gut check and say, here's the problem, here are the symptoms, what's the problem? Or here, I know this is a problem, and what are my options? All of these things are things that we can work on in the strategy call.
Yeah. Jessica, this has been great. I really appreciate your insights and coming on to Speakeasy HR today. This was awesome. I always learn from the guests. So hopefully, folks listening can take into consideration what Jessica has if you might need her services now or in the next 6 to 12 months as you navigate your culture. So it's been a pleasure to have you on, Jessica. I really hope you have a great holiday season and let's keep in touch. And if I can do anything to help you, let me know. But appreciate your time today. And hopefully we'll talk to you real soon.
Absolutely, David. Thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. See ya.
Talk soon. Bye.